At the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to Captain Rich, a seasoned, larger-than-life veteran pilot who has spent decades flying for Northeastern Airlines. The very first time we meet him, he's not in a cockpit. He's at a local bar belting out karaoke like a man who has absolutely zero regrets about his life choices. And honestly, that energy tells you everything you need to know about Rich. He's charming, a little reckless, and completely comfortable being the center of attention. But here's the thing. This is his final flight before retirement. The last chapter of his career is about to begin, and neither he nor anyone else has any idea just how dramatic that final chapter is going to be. Meanwhile, across town, we meet Ben, a first officer for the same airline, and right away, we can tell this man is carrying something heavy. His wife, Nayan, calls him, and you can feel the tension immediately. She's at home, their son Sean is sick, and she's asking Ben to come back. But instead of going home, Ben takes a call from a flight attendant about an available route to Shanghai and says, without hesitation, "I'll take it." He doesn't even let his wife finish talking. Now, we're also introduced to a colorful group of passengers who will all be boarding the same doomed flight. There's Dan, a grumpy, rule-ignoring smoker who lights up right outside the airport after being told not to, and then, with absolutely no shame, lights another cigarette before finally heading inside. He's also carrying a faulty power bank that's already sparking. These two little details? Absolutely critical later. A young girl named Ka who has a serious fear of flying. Her father, Declan, is doing his best to calm her down. Ben actually spots them at the gate and tries to reassure Cora, joking that the most dangerous thing on the plane isn't flying. It's a smuggled hippo. Cora's not impressed, but Ben is clearly a natural with kids. Her new stepmother, Gia, arrives with Finn, Cora's 7-year-old stepbrother. Before boarding, Gia clips a small digital tracking tag onto Finn. At this point, that seems like just a mom being careful. Later, that little device becomes a lifeline. We also meet Lily and Sam, a duo from a competitive esports team. Lily is bold, spontaneous, and clearly has feelings for Sam. She's even written him a letter she's been trying to get him to read. Sam is cautious, rule-following, and emotionally guarded. And then there's Hutch, a cocky American athlete who wastes no time mocking the esports crew. His coach quickly steps in to smooth things over, but the rivalry is already simmering. And rounding out our cast, there's Matt, an ordinary office worker who ends up seated next to Becky, a warm, sharp-tongued elderly woman traveling to Shanghai to visit her granddaughter. The chemistry between these two is quietly wonderful. Becky tells Matt that the flight attendant, Zoe, is a solid 9, while he's a 5 at best. When Matt protests that he has a great personality, Becky doesn't even flinch before saying, he doesn't. All of these people, with their baggage, their secrets, and their unfinished stories, board Northeastern Flight 140 bound for Shanghai. None of them know what's waiting for them on the other side of takeoff. The flight gets underway and things seem completely routine. Rich and Ben settle into the cockpit and we see their dynamic immediately. Rich is laid back, almost deliberately casual, while Ben is precise and by the book. When Ben runs through the pre-takeoff checklist and asks for the flap position, Rich gives him a hard time instead of just answering. Ben, visibly frustrated, holds it together. But Rich later brings up something from Ben's past. An incident in the Air Force where Ben apparently got kicked out for losing his temper with a superior officer. Rich says something that stings a little. You should have been sitting in my seat. And the implication is clear. Ben's career stalled because of one moment where he couldn't keep his cool. Now here he is, playing second seat to a man who's about to retire, trying to keep it together for the sake of his family. But then, somewhere deep in the belly of the aircraft, something terrible begins. Dan's faulty power bank, that sparking little device he smuggled through security, it catches fire in the cargo hold. At first, Ben notices the warning light in the cockpit and activates the suppression system. But the fire doesn't go out. It spreads. Ben calls for Rich, and the moment Rich steps into the cockpit and sees the situation, the dynamic between them shifts. Suddenly, this isn't about rank or ego, it's about survival. And then it gets worse. The turbulence intensifies, and in the cargo hold, the shifting cargo causes an explosion so violent that a pressurized gas cylinder blasts through the cabin floor and strikes a passenger. A flying wine bottle takes down another, and Cora, little Cora who was afraid to fly, gets sucked toward the gaping hole in the floor by the pressure differential. She would have been gone if Lily hadn't grabbed her in time. Rich drops the altitude to stabilize the aircraft, and for a brief moment, it seems like they might be able to manage the situation. Rich comes on the intercom to calm the passengers. But the nightmare is just getting started. The burning debris from the cargo hold gets sucked into one of the engines. It catches fire. And then, in what has to be one of the most terrifying sequences in the entire film, the burning engine tears open the side of the fuselage, and several passengers are pulled out of the plane mid-flight. Gone. Just like that. At the same moment, the flight attendant Zoe discovers Dan in the restroom, smoking a cigarette. On a plane that is literally on fire, this man is something else entirely. Back in the cockpit, things go from catastrophic to apocalyptic. The second engine begins to fail. All instruments roll back to zero. Total electrical failure. The crew is now flying a dying aircraft over the open ocean, using only standby instruments. Rich issues a mayday call. The ram air turbine is deployed to restore some power. When they try to restart the engines, they don't have enough airspeed. They're running out of altitude. Running out of options. Rich makes the call. They're ditching in the ocean. He orders everyone to brace for impact. And this is where Ben earns his stripes. As they descend toward the water, Ben spots the pattern of the ocean swells below them. He tells Rich, calmly, clearly, with everything on the line, that if they land the way Rich intends, the plane will cartwheel and break apart. They need to turn 30 degrees and land parallel to the swells. Rich resists. This is a man who has been flying longer than Ben has been alive. But Ben doesn't back down. He lays out the logic clearly. And Rich, to his credit, listens. He makes the turn. The landing is brutal. The plane screams across the surface of the ocean, breaking apart as it goes. And then it hits a coral reef. The impact is catastrophic. Hundreds of passengers are killed instantly. The wreckage scatters across the water in pieces. But some people survived. When Ben wakes up in the shattered cockpit, his first instinct is to find Rich. Rich is still alive, barely, but something is deeply wrong. Ben's leg is trapped beneath a twisted section of metal wreckage. He's not going anywhere. Rich, with the calm of a man who has made peace with his fate, tells Ben to take the crash axe and pry himself free. And as Ben struggles, Rich tells him plainly, "Go home. Be with your son. Don't waste this second chance." Outside the cockpit, the survivors are scattered across the floating wreckage. The fuselage has broken into sections, each one slowly taking on water. Ben emerges and begins taking stock. With no ELT signal yet, and no rescue in sight, the ocean around them is already becoming dangerous. Sharks have arrived. In one of the most gut-wrenching moments of the film, the flight attendant Penny volunteers to swim through open water to retrieve the emergency locator transmitter from the midsection of the wreckage. She's a champion open water swimmer. She's calm under pressure, and she refuses a life jacket because it'll slow her down. She even takes off her shoes and hands them to Cora. "Keep these safe until I get back." She never comes back. Ben and Cora spot the shark too late. They paddle out desperately, screaming her name, but Penny is attacked before they can reach her. Ben fights off the shark with his paddle, but there's nothing he can do. It's one of the most devastating losses in the film, and it hits hard because of that quiet moment with the shoes. Meanwhile, the survivors in the midsection of the wreckage are dealing with their own crisis. Sam rallies the group, trying to get people to redistribute weight across the coral reef to keep the section from sinking. Hutch fights him every step of the way, but when Sam's plan actually gets people moving, and Hutch's own coach and friend follow along, the tension between them reaches a breaking point. Then a shark takes the coach, and then the friend. And Hutch, shattered and furious, turns on Sam, blaming him for both deaths. In the tail section, Matt, Finn, Zoe, and Becky are trapped inside an air bubble. The water is rising. If they break the seal to escape, the entire section sinks. Matt, injured arm and all, makes the call to swim out and signal for help. He tells Finn to look after the ladies, gives a weak smile, and dives into the dark water. He makes it to the surface. He starts screaming for help, but the next time we see Matt, he's floating face down in the water. Zoe and Finn eventually inflate their life jackets and rise to the surface together. They find a raft. Finn climbs aboard, and just as Zoe is about to pull herself up, a shark grabs her. She fights free. She makes it onto the raft, but the blood loss is too much, and she passes out. And then, while Finn is leaning over trying to wake her, a shark slams into the raft and throws him into the ocean. But here's where that little digital tracking tag comes back into the picture. Cora, borrowing Ben's phone, pulls up Finn's location. The tag is still transmitting. They have a chance to find him. Back on the main raft, things are deteriorating fast. Dan is openly hostile, accusing Ben of causing the crash and risking survivors' lives for his own guilt. When Sam and Hutch are spotted struggling in the water, Dan refuses to go back for them. Ben punches back, not just with words, but with action, and rows out to save them anyway. Then, the rescue helicopter arrives. Everyone on the raft erupts in relief. But this movie is not done with them yet. As the rescue swimmer is lowered into the water, a shark attacks, and the chaos causes the helicopter to crash. Several survivors are thrown into the water. A flight attendant who pulls Dan back onto the raft is immediately taken by a shark after he shoves her down. Dan survives. She doesn't. It's the most morally ugly moment in the film, and it lands like a punch. In the distance, a Chinese fishing trawler appears, but the trawler can't cross the reef. The survivors have no paddles, and Cora, who has been carrying the weight of losing her family since the crash, has wandered off onto a floating piece of wreckage. Without hesitating, Ben dives into shark-infested water and swims to her. And when he finally reaches her and she refuses to leave, because she's found her father Declan floating nearby, Ben doesn't force her. He crouches down and tells her gently, "Your dad would want you to be brave right now. We're just going to take a little detour." That phrase, a little detour, carries so much weight in this moment, because earlier, when Cora was afraid to fly, Ben told her that sometimes in life you have to take a few detours to get where you're going. He was talking about his own career then. Now he's talking about her father, about loss, about finding the strength to keep moving anyway. The captain of the trawler orders his crew to dump their entire catch into the water to draw the sharks away from Ben and Cora. Ben fires flares at the sharks circling them, and they make it back to the raft. Dan, in what might be his final act of cosmic karma, spots his floating pack of cigarettes in the water and leans over to grab one. A shark launches out of the water and takes him, and somehow the movie earns it. The trawler picks up the survivors and changes course based on Finn's tracker. They find Zoe, badly injured but alive, still on the raft. And Finn, impossibly, is still alive too. The reunion between him and Cora is one of the few warm moments in a film that has been absolutely merciless. But Becky doesn't make it. The tail section went under. She knew she wasn't getting out. In her final moments, she spoke to her granddaughter in her heart and said goodbye. We finally learn why Ben has been avoiding home. His son Sean has cancer. Ever since the diagnosis, Ben couldn't face it. So he ran, kept taking flights, kept putting distance between himself and the one thing he was most afraid of. But after everything he survived, after holding Cora's hand through the loss of her father, after watching Rich die so he could go home, after swimming through sharks to save a little girl, Ben finally makes the call. He calls his wife, and he tells her he's coming home. No more detours. Now listen, if you made it to the end of this video and you're not subscribed yet, I genuinely need you to ask yourself why. We break down films like this every single week, the ones that hit differently, the ones that stay with you. The least you can do after I just took you through every shark attack, every sacrifice, and every emotional gut punch in this film is hit that subscribe button. It literally takes 2 seconds, and it means everything to this channel. And drop a comment below. I want to know, who hit you the hardest in this movie? Was it Penny in the shoes? Rich singing in the flooded cockpit? Or that final phone call from Ben to his wife? Let me know down below. I read every single one.